What's up, everybody? Welcome back to John's Fantasy Football Show. I'm Jared. That's John. So, I wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for all the love on the past two Fantasy Football Show videos. They've gone over, I think, 600 views, which is just mental for us. So, I did want to thank you guys for that and all the love. Hopefully, the advice that John gave helped you win last week, and we're going to try and do the same this week. We have a full schedule on hand. As always, we have week 6 reactions, and we're going to put in a week 7 bye fill-in segment where if you have a lot of players on your bye week, who can you put in to replace them that could try to get the same amount of production? We have fantasy strategies, as always, and week 7 predictions. So without further ado, let's get right into it with John's week 6 reactions, as well as the week 7 buy and fill in.
So yeah, like you said, week 6, last week, I actually posted a video on TikTok. I think I talked about it, but I ended up saying I post a video every Tuesday or Wednesday. I try to post it Tuesday, but we got banned from TikTok for a few hours, so we couldn't post until Wednesday. So last Wednesday, which is like, I guess, 10 or 11 days ago now, I posted a video and I said, these are some guys you should pick up in your fantasy leagues. And the first was Darrell Williams. He ended up having over 20 fantasy points last week and 2 touchdowns. The second was David Njoku, who had 27 points the week before, but only 1.9 points last week. So that was a miss. But then Ricky Seals-Jones, I said he was the biggest sleeper tight end because Logan Thomas was injured and still is injured. And Heinicke was looking at Ricky Seals-Jones in the end zone a bunch of times. And he ended up with a long touchdown and 15.9 fantasy points. So this past week, I posted a video about week 7 buy fill-in. So I posted it on Tuesday, kind of similar to last week. And I said, these are 3 guys you should pick up in all your leagues if you need somebody to fill in for your week 7 buy. So I did 1 quarterback, 1 wide receiver, and then 1 running back. And I'll tell you what those were, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit more because basically my quarterback was Matt Ryan. He plays the Miami defense this week, who the Jaguars just beat, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Calvin Ridley is back. We know Pitts had a really great game a couple weeks ago. They just had a bye, so they get the game plan for Miami. So I think Matt Ryan's a great option if you have a Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott, Josh Allen on a bye. And my other quarterback I wanted to mention, if somebody already picked up Matt Ryan in your leagues, is Ryan Tannehill. I know he's been handing the ball off to Henry a lot, but Henry's had a lot of success. So as many times as if you have a good running back, that also could help the quarterback. I know you're like, oh, but he's just going to keep handing it off. Henry's going to get all the touchdowns, but they're going to get close to the goal line, and then they're going to have to throw the ball. So the more they move the ball down the field, the better chance that Tannehill can throw a touchdown. And A.J. Brown and Julio seem like they're both going to play again this week. They're both not fully healthy, but I think he's a good streaming option against the Chiefs defense, who we've been talking about all season so far. They've been horrible. And my one wide receiver that I posted in the TikTok was Brandon Ayuk. And a lot of you probably won't trust him, but if you need a guy, there's a lot of receivers that are on bye this week. And if you need a guy that could fill in, it could be Ayuk. And the reason I'm saying Ayuk is because San Francisco had a bye last week. And I always talk about this. If I didn't mention it on my fantasy football podcast here, I mention it. I've mentioned it before, is that when teams go on a bye, they usually, have a reflection of their team. And last year I talked about it when I predicted DeAndre Swift to have 2 touchdowns as a rookie. Basically, when they go into a bye, they want to reevaluate their team and look at what they're doing well and not doing well. And then they want to fix that. So let's think about the 49ers. They go into their bye last week in week 6, and they see that, okay, we're relying a lot on Deebo Samuel. Our running backs aren't really solidified, and we don't really have a tight end because Kittle is out. So the only way, they got Elijah Mitchell back, so that hopefully solves their running back situation. Kittle is still out, so they got Russ Dwelly at tight end, who's not as good of a receiving tight end. And then they got Deebo at wide receiver, and they know that they have to get Brandon Ayuk involved. And I saw a lot of reports this week, people reporting that San Francisco wants to get Ayuk more involved into the offense. And what better game to do it than on Sunday Night Football against the Colts. And we just saw the Colts give up so many fantasy points to, Baltimore Ravens, the Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown. They just can't cover anybody. So I expect Ayuk to have probably 8 to 10 targets, and he's going to get over 10 fantasy points, probably over 15, and he might steal a touchdown. So if he's a guy that you could pick up. If you have a lot of guys on bye, your wide receivers, you could put him in your flex or your wide receiver 2 spot. Another wide receiver I wanted to mention, and I don't know if you know this, Jared, but this guy, his name is Jakobi Meyers. He has an NFL record. It's not really a good record to have, but he has a record, and I just had it before. He has 116 career receptions in the NFL, and he has 0 touchdowns. That's the most receptions through 35 games in his career without a receiving touchdown. So no player in NFL history has had 116 receptions with 0 touchdowns since the 1970 merger. And it's become such a big story that last week against the Cowboys, he had a 20-something yard touchdown, but it was called back because of a holding call. And all the players ran over to him in the end zone and they were like mauling him. They were just like so happy. He didn't realize for like a full 30, 45 seconds that he didn't have a touchdown because of the flag, but everybody came over to him and was like, yeah, you got your first touchdown. And then he's like, oh shoot, it was called back on holding. So it's become such a big story that Josh McDaniels and this offense, they want to get him a touchdown. It's such a big story. Kendrick Bourne has so many touchdowns and he has way less receptions. He had that 75-yard touchdown. So what better week to do it than against the New York Jets? And as easy of a defense as you can get. So I think Jakobi Meyers gets his first career touchdown this week, and he's a great guy you could pick up and put into your flex or wide receiver 2 spot. Now moving on to running backs. The guy I posted in my video this past week was J.D. McKissic. Now, Antonio Gibson is getting an MRI. He did get an MRI on his shin. I don't think anything's broken, but he's been playing through this shin injury, and it seems like he's going to play through it again this week. But last week he played a season low in snaps, and they like getting McKissic involved. He's their receiving back for sure. And against the Packers, they should need to throw the ball. So I think McKissic is going to have a good game. His floor is like 10 points because he's going to get like at least 5 catches out of the backfield. That's at least 5 points right there. So McKissic, a good fill-in for running backs. And another one, Devonta Freeman. He tied for the lead for the Ravens in carries last week against the Chargers with 9. And Latavius Murray also had 9, but Latavius Murray was just ruled out for the game this weekend against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, the Bengals don't have a great run defense. It's decent, but with Devonta Freeman getting the most carries, he's a guy that you could throw in your RB2 spot or flex if you need somebody. I'd say his floor is 10 points. I would probably predict him around 14 or 15 points. So if you can get 14 or 15 points from a guy you could just plug in a 12-man league, then that's pretty good. And another guy who I'll talk about a little bit later, but Robert Tonyan, he could fill in for tight end. A lot of you may be looking for tight ends with Dalton Schultz on bye and Jared Cook on bye. But I think Robert Tonyan could be a possibility. But I'll talk about Tonyan in a little bit, so stay tuned for that.
That was beautiful. Yeah, I actually took some of your advice. I upgraded my running back from God, I can't remember the guy's name anymore. The Giants guy.
Devontae Booker.
Yeah, Devontae Booker. You picked him last year for like fantasy, and he did really bad. So I just kind of, when that happens, I just don't like him. So
I know. I picked him. I remember the exact game. It was so funny. It was when Josh Jacobs was out, and he was on the Raiders. And that week they were playing the Jets, and everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, pick up Booker, put him in your lineups. He's just gonna have a great game." And I think he got like 5 fantasy points. So he was a dud. Yeah, I knew going into last week with Barkley out, I didn't waiver for him in any of my leagues. I wavered for Darrell Williams while everybody was trying to get Booker, which turned out to be good. But so who did you replace Booker with?
So I went with J.D. McKissic,
Okay.
which I'm hoping Gibson doesn't play.
Right.
But I figured since he's having an MRI that they're kind of planning to put McKissic in way more than Gibson.
Exactly.
So
right.
I'm hoping for the best.
Right.
Let's move over to fantasy strategies. Now, this is a segment where John will tell you his strategies that he uses to win his leagues. Then you can implement them this week, honestly. So John, take it away as far as fantasy strategies go. The first one looks like injuries.
Right. So obviously, so many injuries in the NFL this season. My first strategy I want to talk about, it's basically use injuries to your advantage in trades. So what that means is there's a lot of teams in your league. If you're in a 12-person league, no matter how many teams are in your league, there's teams in your league that are struggling at certain positions. Now, Jared, I know in our 6-team league, you're struggling with injuries at your running back position. You
Who would have
traded away
thought?
you traded away Kamara to me for Jamar Chase. So that there goes Kamara. You have Najee Harris on a bye, and you have Barkley who's injured. So you got to roll with Hubbard and Darrell Williams.
Yep.
So me as a fantasy owner might be like, okay, let me look at Jared's team. He obviously needs a running back. So it might be a perfect time for me to trade Jared, one of my running backs, for one of his receivers. So this is what I want you to do in your team, in your league. Go through the teams and find out some teams that are hurting at certain positions. Might be wide receiver, might be running back with injuries. And you could, extend a trade to them, see if they would do something. And you could trade away some temporary running backs or wide receivers for an upgrade at one of your positions. So what you could do, you could trade away somebody like Mike Evans and Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard, if you have him on your team, I'm not saying everybody's going to have Mike Evans and Chuba Hubbard who's listening, but I'm saying you could trade somebody like a wide receiver away and Chuba Hubbard, who's only going to be good for a couple more weeks before McCaffrey gets back, for a receiver like Calvin Ridley. So you can trade away a receiver like, let's say, Tyler Lockett and Chuba Hubbard for an upgrade at receiver like Calvin Ridley. Or you could trade Noah Fant, who just didn't have a great game this past game against Cleveland on Thursday night, but you could trade away Fant and maybe a Khalil Herbert, who just had a great game, but he's also just a temporary running back, for a tight end like TJ Hawkinson. So basically you're using Fant or you're using Herbert or Hubbard to upgrade at your tight end position. So you could trade away Fant and Herbert and then upgrade to Hawkinson at tight end. And another one, you could do Damian Harris, a running back who could have a good game against the Jets this week, and maybe like a Mike Davis or something like that for DeAndre Swift. If somebody's hurting at running back in a 12-team league, they might need Damian Harris and they might need Mike Davis because they really don't have the depth to start any valuable guys. And you might be able to, maybe DeAndre Swift might be a little bit of a reach there, but you know what I'm saying? Pair two of your guys, find a team that's struggling and they need some depth right now because of injuries and because of buys. And it's a good time to upgrade your starting lineup. My second fantasy strategy, or it's a strategy I've been talking about all season, but I just wanted to say that I did pick up the Bengals defense in two of my leagues, both 12-team leagues, because they play the Jets next week. So if you have an open roster spot, I have the New England defense playing the Jets this week in both of those leagues, and New England plays at the Chargers next week. And I really don't want to start the Patriots defense against the Chargers. So I just used an open roster spot. I think I dropped Jamal Williams in one of my leagues, and I dropped Mecole Hardman in the other, picked up the Bengals defense. So now I know I'm solidified at defense next week with the Bengals against the Jets. And they might not blow up, but I know they're going to have a high floor against the Jets. And the second thing I want to talk about is look ahead, or the third thing is look ahead to your next week. So obviously we have a lot of buys in week 7. Now week 8, there's not as many buys. Only the Raiders and the Ravens are on bye next week. But look ahead till next week, because this is your last chance. Right now, you guys are listening to this on Saturday or Sunday morning. This is your last chance to pick up some guys that are going to have great weeks next week without using your waiver on them. So like I said, picking up the Bengals a week before. So now I just got the Bengals defense who's playing the Jets next week, and everybody in my league is going to be looking at defenses to pick up on Tuesday and use their waiver for, and they're going to realize that I already picked up the Bengals. So they're going to be like, oh, wow, he thought ahead. So I want you to think ahead for next week if you have any buys. So the Ravens and Raiders are on bye. Now, obviously, if you have Lamar Jackson, you might have a backup quarterback. Not a lot of people have Carr on their fantasy team, but the tight ends, you got Waller and you got Mark Andrews. Those are two great tight ends, and they're both on bye next week. So if you have any of one of those guys, maybe try to pick up a guy like Hunter Henry, who is playing the Jets this week, and he gets the Chargers next week, who gives up the most fantasy points to tight ends. So Hunter Henry could be a great guy to pick up. And also Tyler Higbee. He plays Detroit this week. He could have a decent game. But next week, he plays against the Texans, who give up the third most fantasy points to tight ends. So if those guys are available and you have an open spot, pick them up because your tight end is going to have a bye next week, Andrews or Waller. So always thinking a week ahead so that you don't have to waste your waiver or worry about somebody else picking these guys up.
Yeah, onto the injuries one. In our league, I have a lot of injuries, and I also have a 1-5 record, so I'm in last place, and I'm very desperate. So, if there's any advice I could give, it's that if you're a top team or you're a middle tier team and you're trying to find people to trade for, look for the star players on the last place or bottom of the barrel teams or rankings in your fantasy, because we're super desperate, one, and we're willing to give up stars to get 2 or 3 mediocre players to fill out our roster. Because
Right.
in my 12-man league, same thing. Like my running backs are all bad. Like
Mm-hmm.
the only star that I have, I think, is Kamara, and that's it. So if you're, I have who do I have that's a star? I have Tyreek Hill in that other league as well. So it's like, oh, you want Tyreek Hill, and then I could get 2 medium running backs, like aren't great, but they could combine for maybe 30 points. Then
Right.
I'm gonna do it. So and then you get a star, and you give up 2 mediocre running backs that you probably had on your bench or maybe you were starting on your flex.
Right, exactly. If you're going to have to bench one of your running backs anyway, like in our league, our 6 team, you do have Tyreek Hill. And I remember you saying last week, you were like, if you're going to offer me a top tier running back or even 2 middle tier running backs for Tyreek, I'm going to accept it because you're hurting at running back and you have receivers that you could plug in. Plus, Tyreek Hill is dealing with the injury. So if I have Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Zeke, and Mixon, I'm sure if I gave you Zeke and Mixon for Tyreek, you would accept that in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I would give those guys up for him, but maybe a guy like Darrell Henderson and a different running back. But I'm just saying, like, find, like you said, find those lower tier teams that try to take their star player and give them depth because they know that they need a win now. They can't afford, like, I know you're sitting at 1-5. You're thinking every week, you're like, I can't afford to lose this week. Like, I'll do a trade. I just need a win this week,
Yeah.
while if you're in first place, like I'm in first place in that league and I'm still trying to make trades and finalize my lineup and try to be better for later in the season. So find those teams that are trying to be better now and see what you could do.
Yeah, you have to think about the production of the replacement. So for an example, in the 6-team league, when I have Tyreek Hill, so if I gave him up, I would probably replace him with Jamar Chase. So Jamar Chase has been doing really well, but hasn't really had giant games like Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill in any given week could have plus 35 points.
Right.
So, when Jamar Chase, he's really good. He's really good this year, but does he have that boom that I need in a 6-team league?
Right.
But if I'm looking at, if I give up Tyreek and I replace him with Chase, it's like, okay, that's not too bad. Maybe that's 10, 15 point separation, but like each week. When you're looking at Zeke and you're looking at Mixon and you compare him to my running backs now, which is the Chiefs running back and uh,
Hubbard.
Hubbard, it's like, oh, they could easily dud and get 10 points. And then Mixon and Zeke, they're consistent 20, 25 point guys. So
Right.
now the margin is like, now it's like plus 15 margin. And
Right.
then that's how you kind of upgrade as far as
Exactly.
trading your star away and making sure you're getting back people that are way more consistent each week. And the reason I put Hill up was because he was so inconsistent.
Right.
But now he's proven that he's like the top point getter in my lineup. So I just can't give it away just yet. And I
Mm-hmm.
pulled the trigger too early on Kamara.
Yeah.
Um, we don't know that yet, but that first week that he had, he went off. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, do you know, before we get into week 7 predictions, the bye weeks? I remember doing the draft. I think week 11, there's like a lot of bye weeks.
Yeah,
You
I
rem-
know week 11. I think we were saying week 7 and week 11 are like the two biggest.
Yeah, so that's something for you guys to look out for is, if there's another bye week, look for teams or look for players that have really good matchups. Like
Right.
like you said with the Bengals and the Jets, just finding good defenses to stream.
Right.
All right, let's go to week 7 predictions now. The games aren't great. I like last week we were kind of blessed with a bunch of great games.
Hmm.
But this week we have, Chiefs, Titans, Washington, Packers, Falcons, Dolphins, not crazy games. Bears, Bucks, Saints, Seahawks. Um, let's talk about the games that you love out of that pack and the games that you hate out of that pack.
So I want to preface this segment. It's the week 7 predictions. I want to preface it that actually I think this week is probably the easiest week to predict. Now, obviously, I've gotten things wrong, and I'm probably going to get things wrong this weekend. But I think I'm going to get more things right than wrong in this segment. And when it comes to my weekly picks and must sits, I think based on the injuries and based on the matchups, I think it's pretty easy, I think, this week to predict who's going to do well and who's not going to do well.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, my games to love, the first one, Chiefs versus Titans. I have Chiefs on this list every week. That's going to be a high scoring game. If you have anybody, Mahomes, Darrell Williams, Kelsey Hill, you're starting all of them. And then on the Titans side, you're probably going to try to start Tannehill, Derrick Henry. That's not even a question. AJ Brown and Julio Jones, I would be careful about depending on your other options. I might want to hold them out and depending how their injuries. Obviously, with those two guys, like every week, you're going to have to check on Sunday morning and see what the report is, see if they're going to be limited in snaps, and see what your other options are at wide receiver. The second game is Washington versus Packers. Washington, we've been talking about, their defense is the one of the worst in the league. It's playing way worse than last year. If you have Terry McLaurin, try to get him in your lineup, even though he played less snaps last week. He's practicing again this week on a limited basis. But if you have him, if you have Seals Jones, if you have McKissick, try to get them in your lineup. Heineke, possible streaming option, but I like Matt Ryan and Tannehill better, like I said. And then Packers, Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, Rodgers, you're starting all of them. They should have a great game at home. And then, like I said, Falcons, Matt Ryan, I think good game. Pitts, Patterson, and Ridley, you're starting all of them. And then Dolphins, Tua, possible streaming option this week if you have a quarterback on a bye. Waddle had his best game of his career last week, over 29 fantasy points and 2 touchdowns against the Jaguars. Mike Gesicki, you're starting as well at tight end. I started Gesicki over Fant in one of my leagues, and that seems to be the right decision so far because Fant only had 5 catches for 39 yards the other night against the Browns. So those are the games I like. If you have those players that I mentioned, definitely try to get them into your lineups. The 2 games I hate, the first one is Bears and Bucks, but that one I kind of like. There was a recent report that Antonio Brown is ruled out for that game. Now, Antonio Brown, we've seen last week, he had 9 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown. The week before, he had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that's a really big development. If you have Chris Godwin or Mike Evans, they have to be in your lineup this week. Brady, I would still start. I'm starting Rodgers over Brady in our 6-man league. But Brady, Godwin, Evans, you're starting. Fournette, you're going to try to start because of his usage, but also be careful about him. It's more on the Bears side of the ball. I wouldn't trust Mooney. I wouldn't trust Robinson. I wouldn't trust Fields. I wouldn't even trust Damian Williams if he plays. Khalil Herbert seems to be the guy. And even Herbert, I would be careful with it unless you're in a desperate situation. I would try not to start Herbert because the Bucks have a really good run defense, but they might try to get Herbert involved in the passing game a lot like the Dolphins did with Gaskin when they played the Bucks. And then the second game is the Saints versus Seahawks. I was bearish on the Seahawks receivers against Pittsburgh. That turned out to be a pretty good prediction. I said you should probably be careful about Lockett and probably try to sit him. I would try to sit Lockett this week. DK, he's a flex option for me this week, honestly. Geno Smith, the Saints have had a whole 2 weeks to prepare for this game. and Alex Collins is questionable. I think this is going to be low scoring. I think this is going to be a Kamara game. I think the only guy I would definitely start in this game is on both sides of the ball is Kamara. And then DK would be a flex option. Everybody else I wouldn't start. Winston, possible streaming option as well. But I like Matt Ryan, Tannehill, and even Tua over Winston. I mean, Jared, what do you think? Do you think any of those games that you think I got wrong, or what do you think?
Are you a fan of the Bucks wide receivers? So Brown's going to be out, but oh well.
Brown's going to be out and your
every-
light's going to be out.
every week, every freaking week. I'm just going to keep talking. Are you a fan of Godwin and Evans and I guess that's really it. But like the way the Bucks spread the field and spread the receptions, it's like
Right.
Godwin can only get so much and Evans can get so much, and then it's like, oh, Godwin can have a day and Mike Evans could have 4 or 5 points. You
Right.
know? So like
I think
in a game where they're facing the Bears, where they're probably going to put up 40 points, do you want to start Godwin or Evans in this or no?
Yeah, I mean, we would always say, like you were saying, it's like the Bucks can spread the ball around to so many guys. They have Fournette that they've been using in the passing game. Gronk, but remember, Gronk is out and Antonio Brown is out.
Yep.
So they have Godwin and they have Mike. Basically,
you
the
got to
Bears
look at Fournette too. Fournette's running the ball well. Do they run
Right.
the ball the whole time?
I don't think so. I think the Bears defense has been pretty good. Remember, the Bears beat them last year with Nick Foles on Thursday Night Football. I think the Bucks are trying to get some revenge. I think they're going to win this game. I don't think they put up 40, but I think they put up high 20s, maybe close to 30. And I think Evans and Godwin both get a touchdown this week. If you have Evans or Godwin, they need to be in your lineup this week. 100%. They need to be in your lineup.
Interesting. Okay. You already talked about impact injuries?
No, I didn't. I did talk about the first one. Some injuries. Antonio Brown, like I said, is
Alex
out this
Collins.
week. Yeah, Alex Collins. I mentioned also if
Give me
he
some
doesn't.
good news on Gibson. That's what I need.
Well, Gibson isn't ruled out yet. He's been limited in practice, but I think with McKissick, I think you're pretty much set. I would start McKissick. Another one, Latavius Murray is ruled out. So like I said, Devonta Freeman could be a good plug and play. And then Damian Williams still on the COVID list. He's unvaccinated, so the earliest he could return is Saturday. But there's reports coming out that the Bears really like Khalil Herbert. And even if Damian Williams returns, he might only get a couple snaps. If he doesn't return, Khalil Herbert will get all of them. So definitely be careful of those. There's a lot of other injuries. Like I said, AJ Brown and Julio Jones. Be careful about starting them. You're going to want to see reports up to Sunday morning. Some things that I do on Sunday morning at around 10, 11 a.m., just type in like AJ Brown into Google and just go to news. And most likely somebody has released an article that morning or the night before saying how much he's going to be used in the offense. They might be like, oh, yep, AJ Brown, he was limited in practice and I know he's questionable to play, but they're saying he's going to play a lot of snaps. Or they might be like, oh, they're going to limit his snaps. So like, just check on Sunday morning, and that could be the difference between you winning or losing your matchup.
Okay. All right. This is the moment probably everyone's waiting for. You probably skip to it. Weekly picks and your must sit. Now, it is currently Friday. Do you have your weekly picks picked out or you don't?
I don't have all my weekly picks picked out, but I do want to run through the list like I've done the last couple of times. And I want to tell you some guys that I really like. So, okay, most likely James Conner is going to be one of my weekly picks this week. Now, the reason for this is because the last 2 weeks, Chase Edmonds, he had 6 carries 2 weeks ago. He had 4 carries last week. So last week, the Arizona Cardinals ran the ball 20 times. Kyler handed it off 20 times. 16 of them were to James Conner. And the reason is because Chase Edmonds is dealing with a shoulder injury, and he's limited in practice again this week. So the Texans, who are one of the worst run defenses in the league and give up some of the most touchdowns to running backs, are playing the Cardinals. And James Conner is probably going to get 75% of the carries, and he's their goal line back. So I think James Conner, they should be leading this game. And if they're leading, they're going to be like, all right, we don't want to, like, Edmonds is hurt. We're not going to want to put him in if we're winning by a lot. So let's just keep giving the ball to Connor. So I think Connor is going to get over 15 points, probably over 20 points. He's probably going to be one of my weekly picks, but I still want to hear the reports of how Edmonds practices Friday and how much they say he's going to be involved. If he returns to a full practice Friday and they're like, oh, and reports come out like, oh, yep, he's going to return to a full workload. Okay, then maybe I'm not going to have Connor as one of my weekly picks, but he's probably going to be one of my weekly picks. Obviously, Darrell Henderson needs to be a start this week. He had a great game against the Giants last week. He gets the Lions this week, but Darrell Henderson is an obvious must start, so I probably won't say him. You guys know in my weekly picks, I like to give guys that you guys probably are like considering starting, but maybe not. Henderson is a must start anyway, and you guys know that. So I try not to say obvious players. Another guy, Jacoby Myers, like I said, I think he gets his first career touchdown against the Jets. That's a possibility. Ayuk, I said earlier, it's a possibility I say him against the Colts, depending on the reports that come out and how much he's going to be utilized. Miles Sanders, it's coming kind of like the story about Jacoby Myers in New England. There's becoming a story. Remember, Jared, I told you the other week that Miles Sanders only had like 2 carries against, I think it was the Buccaneers. Like they only ran it 2 times. And we were like, oh my gosh, he had 2 carries for 27 yards and you didn't give it to him a third time.
Yep.
And it's kind of last week, I forget who they played, but if you were watching the game, I don't know if you saw the game, but like they would give a carry to Miles Sanders and he would get like a 10-yard run. And then the fans in Philadelphia would like stand up and cheer, and you could hear them from the television. Like they were like, yes, like clapping, like you guys finally gave it to Miles Sanders like twice in a row. So it's becoming this story in Philadelphia that they're not running the ball a lot. So I like Miles Sanders this week against the Raiders, but I might actually hold out one more week on choosing Miles Sanders as a weekly pick until next week when they play the Lions. And the Lions, we saw what Mixon did to them last week. We're going to see what Henderson does to them this week. He's going to blow them out of the water. So next week against Miles Sanders could be his blow-up game. And then I want to talk about 2 more things. One thing is the Giants receivers. I was going to definitely choose Sterling Shepard as a weekly pick this week, but he's had that hamstring injury. He practiced Wednesday, was fine. He practiced Thursday, and he had a setback with his hamstring injury. So now he's questionable to play. We know Slayton's limited. Engram is limited in practice. Barkley and Galladay and Tony were just ruled out. So if Shepard doesn't play and Slayton doesn't play and Engram doesn't play, Dante Pettis got 11 targets last week. So Dante Pettis could be one of my weekly picks.
11?
He got 11 targets and he just joined the team like last week.
No, they picked him up last year.
No, that was, didn't they? I don't know. Whenever they picked him up, but he doesn't usually play. But Darius Slayton got 14 targets last week, and Dante Pettis got 11. And then the next highest was like 5, I think Engram or something. So like,
oh my gosh,
imagine if Shepard doesn't play, they're going to give 20 targets to Pettis. I mean,
imagine
it's like
you pick him for your weekly pick.
I know if Shepard doesn't play and Slayton doesn't play, and I pick Dante Pettis for my weekly picks, people are going to probably hate me because they're going to think it's a dumb pick. But if he goes off, that'd be amazing.
He's got to be owned by like less than 2% of the people.
Yeah, it's got to be some ridiculously low number. But obviously,
it's 0%.
Nobody owns him.
Nobody in the entire world owns this guy,
dude.
You're right. He had 7.5 points, 11 targets, 5 receptions for 48 yards.
Yeah.
Incredible.
So I think I'm kind of hoping that Sterling Shepard doesn't play. I'm kind of hoping that Slayton doesn't play either, so that they have to throw to Pettis and nobody knows about him, and I pick him as a weekly pick because I kind of hope that happens.
That would be amazing. So Tony's out.
Tony's out. Yep. Galladay's out. Barkley's out.
And
And then Slayton, Shepard, and Engram are all limited and questionable. So,
oh my gosh, now I'm gonna watch just for Pettis now.
Yeah, I can't wait. So stay tuned for Sunday. And one last guy I want to mention that I mentioned earlier, and I said I would mention him again. His name is Robert Tonyan. Now, from last year, he was one of the best tight ends in fantasy, but because of his touchdowns.
He was supposed to have a breakout year this year.
He was supposed to break out, but they got Randall Cobb. They've been spreading the ball around. Okay, I had this really weird feeling, and you might think I'm crazy. I had this weird feeling yesterday that Tunyon is going to catch 2 touchdowns this week
What do you
against.
mean? Like you had a dream or something?
It was, I don't know, I don't remember if it was a dream, but it was like, I remember this happening last year with DeAndre Swift, and I remember it happened. Remember when Pittsburgh was 10-0 and they played the Washington football team and Washington won?
Yeah.
I had a dream the night before that Washington won the game, but I remember coming on the podcast or whatever and talking to you guys, but I was like, I was thinking in my head, I'm like, I'm not going to say that because that's dumb, because I would look really stupid if they actually like lost, because they're supposed to get destroyed by Pittsburgh. So like, it kind of reminds me of that. I don't know why. He only has 1 touchdown this year. I feel like Washington's defense is horrible, remember? So I think Tunyon, it's possible he has 2 touchdowns this week. So
right.
if I can't find anybody else for my weekly picks, he might be in it. We'll see.
This would be good TikTok content if you're right.
We'll see.
That would be really, because your only reasoning is that you felt something.
Yeah, I don't.
There's
Yeah,
there's no like
other. There's no stats behind it.
Yeah, it's just like, you know what? I felt like he's gonna have a good game today, so that's it. Start him.
That's it. That's all I got for you guys. You're just gonna have to get my brain, my intuition.
If you're wrong, people are gonna be so pissed off.
Oh my gosh, they're gonna be so pissed.
F your dreams, man.
Stop dreaming.
Yeah. All right, now someone that you actually picked. You picked a must-sit player, and this guy kind of surprises me because he's on a terrible team.
Well, I guess it's not too surprising, but it's similar. Basically, I picked this guy as a must-sit before, and his name is Corey Davis. I picked him last time he played the Patriots. I picked him as a must-sit. The only guy they
can go to.
Right. He's the only guy they can go to. Now they have Crowder back. But last time, remember when they played the Patriots the week before, he had like 25 fantasy points. And everybody was like, oh my gosh, he's great. And I said, guys, please sit him. He's playing the Patriots. JC Jackson is going to be on him. And he only got 2.8 fantasy points. So this week, obviously he hasn't had like great games. So you're probably not starting him anyway, but definitely don't start him now that I'm saying this. And actually, I didn't even really mean for this to happen, but the last 3 weeks, my number one must sit, it plays against the Patriots, and JC Jackson is covering them. Cooks only got like 4 points two weeks ago. Amari Cooper only got 10 points last week. And now Corey Davis, all covered by JC Jackson. So I don't know, that I didn't really mean for that to happen. I don't think JC Jackson's the best corner in the league. I think he's good, but I think Belichick's going to take away Corey Davis, and I don't think he has 10 fantasy points. So try to sit him.
Yeah, JC Jackson's really good in Madden. I'll tell you that much. I pick him up every time when I restart a franchise. Super easy to trade for. So,
good.
This is Madden 21. I'm too cheap to buy Madden 22. Yeah, no, you really like the Patriots defense though. It's like every time you pick a must sit,
I know, yeah, the last 3 weeks. I don't think I'll be doing that for a little while now because they play the Chargers next week, and I think the Chargers, after a bye, they're probably going to blow out the Patriots, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, that concludes John's Fantasy Football Show. I want to kind of run down some of our stuff that we have going on. We just started a Patreon. Now, there's 3 tiers to this Patreon. And John, do you want to kind of break down the different tiers?
Yeah, sure. So Patreon is a free app that you guys could download. And if you look us up, we're a creator, Dorm Debate Podcast on Patreon. And basically, you guys support us, yes, with money, because I've been getting hundreds of DMs on Instagram asking for advice on fantasy. And it's gotten to the point where I just can't answer everybody. And I don't want to give you guys just 1-word answers, and I don't want to leave you guys without an answer. So we started this Patreon to give answers to our most loyal fans. So tier 1, you get all my must sits, all my weekly picks, my top 10 rankings for each position each week, which I post at 11:45 a.m. So if you can't join my TikTok live on Sunday, I know everybody's busy. Usually you're busy at noon. Eastern time on a Sunday morning before the kickoff. So if you can't, make my live, all you have to do is join the first tier in Patreon, and you get all my weekly picks, must sits, and rankings for each position, so that you don't have to worry about joining the live. The second tier is you get everything in tier 1, all weekly picks, must sits, and rankings. Plus, I answer any of your questions you have through a private chat on Patreon about fantasy football, trade advice, lineup advice, strategies, anything like that. I'll answer within 24 hours up until Saturday night at midnight, because Sunday morning I'm usually prepping for my live, but I'll try to get to it, but no promises there. And then the third tier is you get all of tier 1, tier 2, and you get a 10-minute phone call with me each week, which I've already had a couple this week so far, and I have another phone call today. And I love talking to you guys over the phone, discussing fantasy, talking about your team. And just to recap, so tier 1 is $4 a month, which is just $1 a week for my weekly picks, must sits, and rankings, so that if you miss my live, you won't miss out on any of that. And then tier 2, which you get all weekly picks and everything, plus answers, is $2 a week, so $8 a month. And then tier 3 is $5 a week and $20 a month for everything together, including the phone call.
Yeah, this Patreon is great because this way you can actually go in depth, and you could also just build like a relationship with our real fans,
Right.
and go more in depth to the fantasy, and then you could help them out more rather than just saying one word answers and
Right.
just
Like
leave it.
there was one guy that I had a phone call with yesterday, and I was talking to him, and he has Calvin Ridley, Debo Samuel, and Terry McLaurin. Terry's in his flex, so he has Ridley and Debo starting, and he had Mike Evans on the bench. And I was like, okay, I like that, because Chicago's defense has been pretty decent lately, and Antonio Brown seems like he's going to play. But then Antonio Brown was ruled out today, so I messaged him on Patreon, and I was like, oh, bro, just so you know, Antonio Brown is ruled out. I think you should put Evans in for McLaurin, because McLaurin the last couple of weeks hasn't been doing good. I know he has a good matchup against the Packers, and they're going to have to throw it a lot, Washington is. But I think with Antonio Brown out, you're really going to have to start Evans, and I think he's going to have a great game. So I was like, I would start Evans over McLaurin at your flex. And he's like, oh, thanks for letting me know. Like, that's awesome. I'll do that. So like just things like that, where like I have more time to focus on you guys, and I could give better advice.
Exactly. And if you can't do the Patreon, then as always, like we said, the TikTok live that John does is from noon to 12:45. So you can go join him for that. And just if you follow us on Instagram and on TikTok at Dormbait Podcast, John does post, waiver wire pickups. He does post players that he thinks will pop off in the later weeks, or any buy replacements he'll make TikToks for. So go and follow us over there as well at Dormbait Podcast. And yeah, I think that covers everything. So
Yeah.
we appreciate you guys so much, and for us to be able to do the Patreon and have fans, and it's pretty surreal, but we do appreciate it. And any other people just doing the Patreon just to support us and donate is crazy. But we do want to thank you guys so much. Thanks for commenting and liking. And yeah, we will see you guys next week, Saturday morning. So I hope you guys win your fantasy leagues or your fantasy weeks, and we will see you guys next week.